Hello, my dear students. So, we are continuing with chapter number 7, Getting to Know Plants. So, let's see what we are going to learn today. Today, we will be learning about the parts of a flower and the formation of fruits and seeds. Okay. So, in our last class, we have discussed in details about the structure and functions of a leaf. Okay. So, two more structures are left, that is flowers, fruits and seeds. Okay. So, today we will be learning about the functions and parts of a flower. Each part we will be discussing in details, and then we will be learning about the formation of fruits and seeds. Okay. So flowers, they are the most beautiful and attractive part of a plant. Okay. Different plants have got different types of flowers. Now these flowers, they can be of many sizes, shapes and colors. The flowers, they have different smell, but some of the flower, they do not have any smell. So the most common flowers are rose, bougainvillea, then jasmine, lily, sunflower and marigold. Now the flower is that part of a plant which contains the reproductive organ. You all know that reproduction, it is also a vital process for the living organisms, and plants, they also undergo the process of reproduction. Okay, so this flower, it is the basic reproductive organ of a flower. Okay. The main function of flowers is to produce food, fruits and seeds. Okay, and all the flowers, they have the same basic parts. That means the part which we will describe today, all the flowers, it has got same basic parts. Now, what are the different parts of a flower? Here you see the different parts of a flower are number 1 sepal, number 2 petal, number 3 stamen and number 4 is pistil. Here you see this is the diagram of the structure of a flower. Okay, this part is known as the sepal. Okay, the green colored part, okay, which holds the entire flower, entire content of flower is known as sepal, this part. Now since the sepal is green in color, it contains chlorophyll. Okay, now this part, this colorful part, this is known as the petal. Okay, this is known as the petal, and two more organs are present. One is the stamen, that is the male reproductive part, and another one is the pistil, that is female reproductive part. Okay, each and every parts of a flower I will discuss in details today. Okay, stamen, it has got two more part, that is number 1 is anther, number 2 is filament. This part is called anther, this part is called filament. And pistil, the female reproductive organ, it also contains 4 parts. Number 1, this one is the stigma, the topmost part. This is the connecting tube, this is the style. This one, the swollen portion, is the ovary, and inside the ovary the egg-like structures are present, which is called ovules. All right. So coming to sepal, first part of a plant, sepal. What is sepal? The green leaf-like parts in the outermost circle of a flower is called sepal. Here you see, this is the flower, the entire flower, it is attached in sepals. Okay, sepal, it acts as a vase, like flower vase. When you buy some flowers from the market, then what do? You just put these flowers in a vase, isn't it? So here the sepal, it acts like a flower vase. It holds the entire content of the flower. Okay. Now, the sepals, it protects the flower when it is in the form of bud in the initial stage. When the flower is in the form of a bud, you will find that the entire content of the flower, it is covered by the sepal. Okay. Now, some sepals, they are joined together. That means a part of the sepal, sometimes you will find that they are joined together. Whereas in some flower, you will find that they are separated from each other. Like this one is the example where it is joined to each other. But in few cases, you will find that they are separated from each other. All right. One more information I want to give you. The other name of sepal is calyx. Okay, in higher class we will learn the other name of sepal is calyx. Okay, C-A-L-Y-X, calyx. Now, next comes the petal. The second part of a flower, that is petal. Now inside the sepals there are petals of a flower. This petal, it is actually the most attractive part of a flower. Okay. Now petals of flower, they can be of different colors, shapes, sizes. Okay. Different colors, it can include some petal of a flower, you will find they are red, some are blue, then green, orange, pink, white, or any other color. Green, it is very rare. Okay, green colored flower, it is very rare, but sometimes you will find that in case of some white flowers, you will find a slight greenish pigment is present over there. Okay. But other than green, the other colors which are there like red, blue, orange, pink, white, these are very common. Okay, mostly this variant you will find in case of bougainvillea or rose or china rose. Okay, different colored petals. All right. Now, the petals of some of the flowers, they have natural scents in them due to which they smell very nice. And these petals, they also attract insects. Why the petal they attract insects? I will discuss later on. Okay. Now, the ring of colorful petals in a flower, it protects the reproductive organ of a flower. What are the reproductive organ? Includes stamen and pistil, as I have said. Okay. Now, these petals, they may be either separated from one another or they are joined together to form a tubular flower. Alright. Now in many flower you will find the number of petal it is equal to the number of sepals in it. If suppose in a flower there are 6 number of sepal, in some flower you will find that the petals are also same in number, that is 6 in number. For example, buttercup flower. Buttercup flower, it has got 5 green sepals and you will find an equal number of petals are there, that is 5. Okay, but in some flowers, this petal, it is not equal to the number of sepals. Alright, in such flowers, the number of petals are more than that of the number of sepals. Like most of you will, you are having China rose plant at your home. In case of China rose only, you will find that the number of petals, they are more than the number of sepals. Alright, so thus you can say that number of petals and sepals of a flower is not always equal. Okay. So here you see these are the different shapes and sizes. Okay, and this is the most attractive part of a flower. And one more information I want to give you is that the other name of petal is corolla. Corolla, C-O-R-O-L-L-A, corolla. Now, the next one is stamen. Okay, now stamen, it is the male part of a flower. Okay, stamen is the male part of a flower. Now, just inside the petals of a flower, there are many little stalks with swollen top. Here you see. Little stalks are there with swollen top. Here you see. These are the swollen tops. Okay. Now, these stalks with swollen tops are actually called stamen. Okay. And this stamen, it consists of two parts. One is the filament and another one is the anther. Okay. The topmost part is known as anther and the stalk. Okay. The narrow tube, that is known as what? That is known as filament. Okay. Now, the stalk of a stamen, which is called filament, and top of the stamen is called anther. Now, anther, it contains what? This is the anther. If you touch the tip of the anther with your finger, you will find that some yellow colored dusty powder, it is attaching onto your fingertip. Okay, this yellow powder like substance is called what? Is called pollen grains. Very important. What is pollen grain? The anther contains a yellow powder like substance is called pollen grain. Okay, if you cut the anther of a flower horizontally with a blade, then you can see the pollen grains in it. Okay, and what is this pollen grain actually? It is pollen grain is the male reproductive cell of a plant. Okay, stamen is the organ. Remember, don't get confused. Stamen is the organ and the pollen grain, it is the male reproductive cell of a plant. This pollen grain, it is present inside the stamens. Okay, and in a flower there are many stamens. Okay, they form a ring around a female part of a flower called pistil. When I'll explain you pistil, you will come to know that. Okay, and next is the pistil. What is pistil? One more thing I want to say you that what is the other name of sepal? The other name of sepal is androecium. Remember the other name of sepal is androecium. Okay. Next is pistil. Now, in a center of a flower, there is a flask-shaped organ. Okay, that is called what? That is called pistil. This is actually the structure of a pistil. Here you see this is almost a flask-shaped organ, conical flask shape. Okay, more or less. Okay, round bottom flask in the laboratory you will use later on. Okay, so it looks like a flask. Okay, and this is present at the center of a flower. Okay, and this part is known as what? This part is known as pistil. Okay, pistil, it is the female part of a flower. That means this is the female reproductive organ of a flower. Female reproductive organ of a flower. Now, this pistil, it is made up of three parts. What are the three parts? Number one is stigma. This one is the stigma. Next one is the style. And the last one is the ovary. Okay. Now, the top part of the pistil is called stigma, as I said. Okay. Now this stigma, it is very sticky, so that pollen grain can stick to it. Sometimes what happens, suppose if any insect sits onto the flower, the pollen grains, they get attached to the legs or the sucking pipe of the insect. Okay. Now when they are sitting onto another flower, then what happens? Those pollen grain, it falls onto the stigma. The stigma, it is the receiving surface of the pollen grain. All right. Then what happens? That male reproductive cell, that pollen grain, it enters inside the pistil via this connecting tube called style. Okay. Style is what? Style. The middle part of the pistil is called style, and it is the tube which connects stigma to the ovary. This is stigma. This one is ovary, and style, it is the bridge between stigma and ovary. Okay, now the swollen part at the bottom of the pistil is called ovary. Now, in comparison to this part, you will find that this part is little bit of swollen. Okay, so the swollen part which is present at the bottom of the pistil is called ovary. Okay, and inside the ovary, like if you cut the ovary, if you cut the ovary vertically with the help of blade, you will find that inside there are tiny egg-like structures are present like this on both the sides. Those are known as ovules. Okay, ovules. These tiny egg-like structures are actually ovules. Okay, and the ovules, it contains the female reproductive cell of a plant. Female reproductive cell of a plant. So when I explained you about stamen, there you came to know that pollen grain, it is the male reproductive cell, and ovules are what? Ovules are the female reproductive cell of a plant. Okay, and this female organ, pistil, it is surrounded by number of male organs present in it. Okay. And this pistil, the other name of pistil is gynoecium, also carpel. Okay, if you say it is gynoecium, then also it is correct. And if you say it's carpel, then also it is correct. Okay. Now, in most plants, the stamen and pistil, they are present in the same flower. Those flowers are known as bisexual flower. Okay, and in some plants the stamen and pistils are present in separate flower. Those are known as unisexual plant. About this in details about unisexual plant and bisexual plant, you will read in details in class 7. Okay, now here you see this is a 3D model of the structure of a flower. Now this one is what? This part, it is what? It is the uh, sepal. Okay, it is holding the entire part of a flower. These colorful parts, these are what? These are the petal. What is the function of petal? Petal, it attracts the insect, okay, for the process of pollination. Okay, it provides scent. Okay, now this part, this four structures, these are what? These are the stamens. Okay, that means the male reproductive organ. Now if I consider this stamen, this part is known as what? This part is known as anther. The topmost part is known as anther. And this stalk-like structure, it is known as filament. Okay. Now inside anther, the yellow color dust-like substances are present, which is called pollen grain. Okay. That pollen grain is the male reproductive cell. Alright, now just at the center of the flower, here you see, this is what a flask-shaped organ is present. This one is known as what? This one is known as pistil. This is the female reproductive part of a plant or female reproductive organ of a plant. Now this part of pistil, it is known as what? It is known as stigma. Okay. From here the pollen grain comes and the stigma receives the pollen grain. Okay. Then that pollen grain, it is carried towards ovary via this tube known as what? Known as style. Then it reaches the ovary. This swollen portion is called ovary, and inside the ovary, the tiny egg-like structures are present, which are known as ovules. Okay, ovules are what? Ovules are the female reproductive cell. Alright, this is all about your structure of a flower. Now we will come to the formation of fruits and seeds. Okay, because only in the flowering plant the fruit bears, isn't it? So how the fruits are formed, now we will discuss. Now, what is a fruit? A fruit is that part of a plant which contains the seeds. Example, you all have read in chapter number 1, like apple, oranges, plums, lemons, tomatoes, then if I say brinjal, okay, apple, then mango, okay, all these are what? All these are fruit. Lychees, okay, they all have seeds inside them. Okay, even the pea, this one is what? This one is the pea. Now, which part do we eat? This round part we eat, isn't it? But this is not the fruit. Remember, this is not the fruit. These are the seeds that we eat. And this outer covering, the pea pod that we throw, this is actually the fruit. Okay, in case of pea, we eat the seed and the fruit we throw out, isn't it? But in case of apple, a common example I'm giving you, we eat what? We eat the fruit, okay, and the seed we throw out. All right. Now, we will discuss about formation of fruits and seeds. So, step 1 is the pollination. Okay. Now, the fruits and seeds, they are formed from flowers by two processes. One is the pollination and another one is the fertilization. First step is pollination. What is pollination? Pollen grains, I have said what is pollen grain. That is the male reproductive cell. Now, the transfer of pollen grains from anther of a stamen to the stigma of a pistil is called pollination. Here you see this butterfly. It is sitting onto the flower. It is taking the pollen grain from the anther of a stamen, and when it is sitting to the another flower, then it is dropping that pollen grain onto the stigma, okay, of the female reproductive organ. Okay, so this pollination, this entire process is called pollination. Okay, the transfer of pollen grain from the anther of a stamen to the stigma of a pistil is called pollination. And this pollination, it is done by three agents. What are the three agents? Number one is insect. Insect, most common insects are butterfly and bee. Okay, then wind and water. Okay, the aquatic plant, in case of aquatic plant, the pollination is done by water, by wind also, like few you will find few lightweight seeds are there, few lightweight seed like maple, oaks, okay, in that case the pollination they are done by wind. Okay, drumstick flower, those are very light in weight, okay, those are done by wind. And mostly the pollination, it is done by insects. Insects, it gets attracted by the color and smell of a flower, they sit for sucking nectar and all, and then they take up the pollen grains, and when they are sitting onto the another flower, then that pollen grains falls into another flower and it produces what? Produces the fruit. Okay. Now, after pollination, the next step is fertilization. Okay, right after pollination, the next step is fertilization. Now, all of you understand this carefully. What happens? Now, when the pollen grain falls onto the stigma, they move down through a tube called style and reaches the ovary. Now, here you see this diagram, all of you see. This is the diagram of what? Female reproductive part, that is pistil. As I said you, this part is stigma, this part is style, this part is ovary, and inside the ovary there is ovule. Okay. So when the insect is carrying the pollen grain, first it is falling onto the stigma. The pollen grain, it is landing on the surface of stigma. Now, as soon as the pollen grain lands on the surface of a stigma, it produces a tube known as pollen tube. Okay. Now, the inside of the tip of the tube, it contains the male cell of a flower. This inside. Okay. Now, what happens? This tube, it grows down the style to reach the ovules in the ovary. This tube, it gets elongated, and finally where it reaches ovary. Okay, and directly it reaches the ovule. Okay, now inside each ovule there is a egg cell. Okay, now this pollen grain, what happens? It fertilizes with the egg cell which is present in ovules, and it forms what? It forms fruit. Okay, the fertilization take place. What is fertilization? The joining together of the male and female reproductive cell is called fertilization. That means the joining of pollen grain and ovules. Okay, right after the fertilization, what happens? The ovules, it grows and becomes seeds. All the ovules, it turns into seeds, and the ovary of a flower, it grows and it becomes fruit with seed inside it. That means this part, it turns to form what? It turns to form fruit, and inside part, this ovule, it forms what? It forms seeds. Okay, a fruit, it protects the seed, and remaining other flower part of a flower, it dries up and it falls off. All right. Now the wheat grains, then gram, that is chana, then corn, peas, pulses, beans, which we use as food, they are all the seeds of the respective plants. All right. Now all these seeds, they can germinate under suitable conditions to produce new plants. Like when we sow wheat seeds in a field, they grow to give up. Alright, so this is all about your formation of fruits and seeds. I hope the concept of flower and the formation of fruits and seed is clear to you. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you everyone.